Avoidants never come back unless you do this. Let me tell you something. If you've ever felt abandoned, if you've ever watched someone walk away and wondered, will they ever come back? You're not alone. But let's cut the fluff. Avoidants don't come back because of time. They don't come back because you miss them. They come back when something changes, and that change starts with you. Avoidant people are wired to flee when things get too close. It's their instinct. But listen, what do most people do? They chase. They beg. They try to prove their worth. And every time the avoidant pulls further away, sound familiar? Now here's the game changer. The only way they come back is if you become someone they no longer need to run from. Think about that. It's not about them. It's about you stepping into your power, into your highest self, where their fears no longer control the dynamic. Here's what you do. You stop waiting, you stop obsessing, and instead you start becoming. You become the person they assumed you couldn't be, confident, whole, unshaken by their absence. You step into a space where their return is no longer your validation because you are the prize. Listen to me. If you take nothing else from this today, take this. When you raise your standard, when you shift your energy, they will feel it, they will sense it, and suddenly you are the one they're drawn to. But by the time they come back, you may not even want them anymore. Stop chasing, stop waiting, step into your power, because the only way avoidants come back is when you no longer need them to. When someone with an avoidant attachment style leaves, it feels like an emotional punch to the gut. You replay every moment, every word, trying to figure out what went wrong. But here's the truth that most people don't want to hear. Avoidants don't come back just because you miss them. They don't return because time has passed or because they had some sudden realization of your worth. They come back when something shifts. And that shift isn't random. It's not about luck. It's about transformation, your transformation. Think about it. An avoidant person distances themselves because they feel overwhelmed by closeness, by expectations, by the idea that they might have to give up their independence. The moment they sense pressure, their first instinct is to pull away. It's not always logical and it's not always fair, but it's how they're wired. And what do most people do when someone pulls away? They panic. They reach out. They try to fix things. They overanalyze every text, every call, every action, hoping for some sign that the avoidant is reconsidering. But here's the paradox. The more you reach, the further they retreat. The more you try to hold on, the more suffocated they feel. They don't leave because they stop caring. They leave because they feel like they have to. Your desperation, your attempts to pull them back in, only reinforce the reason they left in the first place. Now, this is where the shift happens. If you truly want an avoidant to come back, the first step is understanding that it's not about them at all. It's about you. It's about your energy, your mindset, and the way you show up in the world. Most people believe that if they just wait long enough, avoidance will have a revelation and return. But waiting is passive, it's powerless, and it keeps you stuck in the exact energy that pushed them away. Instead of waiting, you need to create a shift so powerful that it changes the entire dynamic. And that shift begins with stepping back into your power, not pretending, not faking confidence, but actually embodying the kind of energy that is so self-assured, so whole, that an avoidant no longer feels the need to run. Because here's the secret. They are not allergic to love. They are allergic to pressure. When they sense that you no longer need them to feel whole, that's when the game changes. It's about becoming a version of yourself that radiates confidence, abundance, and emotional security. When you do that, something remarkable happens. The avoidant, who once felt the need to escape, suddenly feels curiosity. They start to wonder why you're not chasing. They start to feel the absence of your energy. And for the first time, instead of feeling like they need to run, they start questioning why they left in the first place. But this shift isn't about playing games or trying to manipulate them into returning. It's about real transformation. It's about reaching a place where their return is no longer your goal because you've outgrown the old version of yourself that was dependent on their validation. It's about becoming someone so magnetic, so unshakable, that whether they come back or not no longer determines your sense of worth, because the truth is people are drawn to strength. When you stop needing them to come back, when you stop making their presence the center of your happiness, you become the one in control. You become the one who decides. And ironically, that's when avoidants feel safe to return because they no longer feel the weight of expectation. So if you're sitting there wondering when or if an avoidant will come back, shift your focus. The question isn't when they'll come back. The question is, who are you becoming in the meantime? Because the only way they return is when you step into a version of yourself that no longer needs them to. And when that happens, whether they come back or not, don't even matter anymore. When an avoidant leaves, the immediate reaction is often confusion, frustration, and a deep sense of loss. You start questioning everything, wondering if you said the wrong thing, if you were too much, or if they ever truly cared. The pain can be overwhelming, leading you down a path of overanalyzing every moment you spent together, searching for the exact reason they walked away. But the harsh reality is that avoidants don't come back just because you missed them. They don't return simply because you've spent months thinking about them, hoping for a message or replaying memories in your head. They come back when something significant shifts, and that shift has to come from you. The first mistake people make when dealing with an avoidant partner is believing that time alone will change things. They assume that if they wait long enough, if they stay quiet, if they show enough patience, the avoidant will one day wake up and realize what they lost. But that's not how it works. Avoidants don't operate on nostalgia the way anxious or emotionally attuned individuals do. They don't come back because they suddenly feel lonely or because they miss the emotional connection. They return when the very thing that pushed them away is no longer present. That thing isn't necessarily you. It's the dynamic between you, the energy you bring, the emotional expectations you unknowingly place on them. Avoidants leave when they feel overwhelmed, when they sense that their independence is at risk, or when they believe they are being required to meet emotional needs they aren't ready to handle. Their instinct is to create space, to pull away so they can regain a sense of control over their own emotions. When this happens, the natural response for most people is to reach out, to try to fix things, to get some form of reassurance. But what they don't realize is that this behavior only reinforces the avoidance decision to stay away. Every text, every attempt to seek closure, every reminder of what you had together feels like pressure to them. The real shift happens when you stop engaging in this cycle. When you truly accept that an avoidant will not return because of your longing, but because of a shift in your own energy, everything changes. Instead of waiting, instead of seeking their validation, you step into a version of yourself that no longer operates from a place of fear or neediness. This doesn't mean pretending to be indifferent or playing mind games to make them jealous. It means genuinely becoming someone who is fulfilled on their own, someone who is no longer emotionally reliant on their return to feel whole. This is where most people struggle because it requires real internal work. It's not enough to act confident or busy. You have to actually become the type of person who no longer feels dependent on their presence. You have to build a life that is so fulfilling, so rich in purpose and self-worth that their absence no longer defines you. When this happens, something fascinating occurs. The avoidant, who once felt the need to escape, starts to sense the shift. They may not even understand why, but they feel it. The energy they once associated with emotional pressure or expectation is gone. The person they left behind is no longer seeking them, no longer waiting for their validation, and that change is magnetic. Avoidants are not necessarily afraid of connection. They are afraid of losing themselves in it. When they sense that you no longer need them to feel whole, they begin to see you differently. They begin to wonder why you're not chasing, why you're not seeking their approval. They start to feel the absence of your energy. And in that space, curiosity is born. They may reach out, not because they suddenly miss you in the way you expect, but because something about you is different. Something about you feels safe, free of the unspoken expectations that once made them withdraw. But the most powerful part of this shift is that by the time an avoidant comes back, you might not even want them anymore. When you've truly done the inner work, when you've stepped into a version of yourself that is thriving without them, their return no longer feels like the validation you once craved. Instead, it becomes a choice. And that's the real power, because when you no longer need them to come back, that's when they do. When someone with an avoidant attachment style begins to pull away, the immediate instinct for most people is to chase. They feel the distance growing, and in response, they try to close the gap. They reach out, they send long messages explaining their feelings, they ask questions like, what's wrong, or did I do something? They seek reassurance, hoping to hear something that will ease their anxiety. But what they don't realize is that this very behavior is the thing that solidifies the avoidance decision to leave. Avoidants have a deep-rooted fear of losing their independence. To them, emotional closeness often feels like an obligation rather than a connection. It's not that they don't care, it's that caring too much makes them feel like they're being pulled into something they can't control. When they sense that someone is emotionally dependent on them, it triggers their instinct to escape, and the moment they pull away, most people unknowingly confirm their worst fears by doing exactly what makes them run further. Chasing an avoidant doesn't necessarily mean physically running after them. It's the emotional energy of pursuit. It's the subtle and sometimes desperate attempt to reconnect, whether that's through texting, calling, posting things on social media you hope they'll see, or even just mentally fixating on them. This energy is heavy. It feels suffocating to an avoidant because it tells them that they are responsible for your emotions. It makes them feel like they are being pulled into something they are not ready for. And instead of drawing them back, it reinforces their instinct to leave. Think about it from their perspective. They have already decided they need space. They are already feeling overwhelmed, and then suddenly they are met with a wave of energy demanding answers, seeking validation, and trying to hold on to them. In their mind, this only proves that they were right to leave. It convinces them that if they stay, they will have to deal with even more emotional intensity. And so they withdraw further, leaving you feeling even more abandoned. Most people don't realize they are chasing. They think they are just expressing their feelings, being honest, or trying to gain clarity. But when dealing with an avoidant, intention doesn't matter. Impact does. Even the smallest attempt to check in can feel like pressure. Even the most innocent "I miss you" can feel like an obligation to them. The key is understanding that an avoidant does not respond to words. They respond to energy. If your energy is desperate, longing, or focused on getting them back, they will pick up on it, even if you say nothing. So, what should you do instead? The hardest but most effective thing you can do is stop chasing completely, not as a tactic, not as a way to manipulate them into coming back, but because chasing is the very thing that keeps them away. When you stop reaching, stop seeking, and stop waiting, you remove the pressure they associate with you. And without that pressure, their fear begins to subside. This is why so many people notice that when they finally let go, when they truly move on, the avoidance suddenly reappears. It's not magic. It's the shift in energy. When an avoidance senses that you no longer need them, they feel safe again. They start to wonder why you're not chasing. They begin to question whether they made the right decision. They are no longer met with the emotional weight that once made them withdraw, and in that space, curiosity grows. But the most important part of this entire process is that you don't just stop chasing to get them back. You stop chasing because your self-worth is not dependent on someone who runs at the first sign of closeness. You stop chasing because you deserve a connection that doesn't require you to beg, convince, or wait. You stop chasing because the right person for you will never require pursuit. When someone with an avoidant attachment style pulls away, the natural response for most people is to try and fix the situation. They analyze every interaction, wondering what they did wrong, and they convince themselves that if they can just say the right words or prove their worth, the avoidant will come back. But what they don't realize is that avoidants don't leave because they stop caring. They leave because something in the relationship dynamic makes them feel trapped or overwhelmed. And here's the truth that most people overlook. The only way to get an avoidant to return is to become someone they no longer feel the need to escape from. Avoidants have a deep-seated fear of losing themselves in relationships. They associate intimacy with obligation, pressure, and the potential loss of independence. When they sense that someone is becoming too emotionally reliant on them, their first instinct is to withdraw. It's not necessarily because they don't want a connection. It's because they fear that connection will cost them their freedom. When an avoidant starts pulling away, they are acting on their subconscious programming, which tells them that closeness is dangerous. Most people, in response to this withdrawal, do exactly what confirms the avoidant's fears. They try harder, become more emotionally expressive, they ask for reassurance, they seek explanations, and they unknowingly make the avoidant feel like their escape is justified. But what they don't realize is that the problem was never about words or actions, it was about energy. The avoidant didn't leave because of something specific you did. They left because the emotional dynamic felt suffocating to them, whether you intended it that way or not. So if you want an avoidant to come back, the key isn't convincing them, chasing them, or proving your worth. The key is shifting into a version of yourself that no longer carries the energy they needed to run from in the first place. That means stepping into a place of true emotional independence. It means becoming someone whose presence is calming rather than demanding, someone who exudes confidence rather than neediness, someone who stands so firmly in their own value that they no longer feel the urge to prove it to anyone. This shift isn't about playing games or pretending to be detached. It's about genuinely transforming the way you see yourself and the way you operate in relationships. It's about breaking the cycle of anxious energy that avoidants instinctively run from. When you stop making the avoidant the center of your emotional world, when you stop looking for validation in their return, you become someone different, someone who is no longer a source of pressure, but rather a source of stability. And here's where the real magic happens. When you change, the avoidant feels it. Even if you say nothing, they sense the difference in your energy. They notice that you're no longer chasing, no longer waiting, no longer needing them to come back in order for you to feel whole. And when that happens, their fear begins to fade. The thing that once made them feel trapped is no longer there. And suddenly, they begin to see you in a new light. But the most powerful part of this transformation is that by the time an avoidant starts to reconsider, you might not even want them back anymore. Because the moment you become someone who no longer needs to be chosen, you start to realize that you were always the prize. You start to see that the real work was never about getting them back. It was about stepping into your own power. And once you do that, the dynamic shifts completely. They may come back, but this time you'll be the one who decides whether they stay. Becoming the most confident, independent version of yourself is not just about attracting an avoidant back. It's about reclaiming your power. When someone with an avoidant attachment style pulls away, the biggest mistake people make is trying to convince them to stay. They beg, they plead, they explain, and they believe that if they can just make the avoidant understand how much they care, things will change. But that's not how avoidants work. They don't respond to words, they respond to energy. And the energy of desperation, of emotional reliance, of needing them to come back is exactly what pushes them further away. Confidence and independence are the antidotes to the cycle of chasing and avoidance. When you focus on yourself, on building a life that is fulfilling without them, you shift the dynamic completely. Suddenly you are no longer the person waiting by the phone over-analyzing their every move. You are no longer someone whose happiness depends on their presence. Instead, you become someone who stands firmly in their own worth, someone who isn't seeking approval, validation from an avoidant who is never capable of giving it in the first place. Most people think confidence is about looking a certain way, having the right words, or pretending to be unaffected, but true confidence is internal. It's about knowing that you are enough whether or not they return. It's about understanding that your value is not determined by someone else's ability to recognize it. Avoidants are drawn to people who embody this kind of self-assurance because it feels safe. It feels like freedom rather than pressure. Independence is just as crucial. It means shifting your focus from them to yourself. It means pouring your energy into your passions, your growth, your well-being. It means no longer making their return the goal, but instead making your own evolution the priority. When you become emotionally independent, you no longer react to their distance with fear or anxiety. You don't feel the need to fix or chase because you trust that whatever happens, you will be okay. This transformation does not go unnoticed. Even if you have no contact with the avoidant, they will feel the shift. They will sense the absence of your emotional weight. They will recognize that something is different about you, even if they can't quite explain it. And that is what draws them back. Not your words, not your explanations, but the fact that you have become someone they no longer need to run from. But the most powerful part of stepping into confidence and independence is that by the time they return, you may not even want them back. You will have grown so much that their absence is no longer something you need to fill. You will see that the real work was never about getting them back. It was about becoming someone who no longer needs them to feel whole. And when you reach that point, the dynamic changes completely. The power shifts. They may come back, but this time it will be on your terms. When an avoidant pulls away, it's easy to assume they just need time. Many people think that if they wait long enough, stay patient, or keep the door open, the avoidant will eventually realize what they lost and come back. But this is where most people get stuck. Avoidants don't return because time has passed. They don't come back because they suddenly miss you after a certain number of days, weeks, or months. They return when the energy between you has changed. And that change doesn't happen by waiting. It happens by shifting your focus entirely. The biggest mistake people make when dealing with an avoidant is remaining emotionally stuck in the past. They keep replaying old conversations, wondering if they could have done something differently. They check the avoidance social media looking for clues. They live in a constant state of hoping, waiting, and analyzing. But the truth is, the longer you stay mentally attached to them, the less likely they are to come back. Why? Because your energy is still tied to them. And avoidants can sense that. Even from a distance, even in silence, they can feel when someone is still waiting for them. And that makes them stay away. Avoidants don't return to people who are emotionally stuck. They return to people who have moved forward, who have reclaimed their power, who have become someone they no longer associate with pressure or expectation. This is why waiting doesn't work, because waiting keeps you in a passive state. It keeps you focused on the past instead of building a new future. And that is exactly what needs to change. Instead of waiting, the most powerful thing you can do is shift all of your energy into yourself. Stop thinking about them. Stop checking on them. Stop wondering if they'll reach out. Instead, ask yourself, who do I want to become? Because that's where your real power is. Not in convincing them to return, not in waiting for them to change, but in becoming a version of yourself that is so strong, so self-assured, so fulfilled that their presence or absence no longer dictates your happiness. The shift isn't about playing games. It's not about pretending to move on while secretly hoping they'll notice. It's about truly moving forward. It's about making decisions that are based on your own growth, not on whether or not they will come back. When you start focusing on your own journey, something incredible happens. You naturally detach from the outcome. You stop needing them to return. You stop feeling like their absence is something you need to fix. And in doing so, you become the kind of person who no longer carries the energy that made them pull away in the first place. Here's what happens when you shift your focus. You start radiating a different kind of energy. You start making choices that empower you instead of ones that keep you stuck in the past. You start creating a life that is so fulfilling that their return becomes irrelevant. And ironically, that is what makes an avoidant reconsider. Not because you wanted them to, not because you waited, but because you changed the very thing that pushed them away, the dynamic of emotional reliance. Avoidants come back when they no longer feel the weight of expectation. When they sense that you've let go, that you're no longer waiting, something shifts in them. Suddenly they begin to feel curiosity instead of pressure. They wonder why you're no longer reaching out, why you seem different, why their absence no longer affects you the way it once did. And in that moment, they start questioning whether they made the right decision. But by the time an avoidant starts to reconsider, you may not even want them back. Because when you truly shift your focus, when you truly move forward, you stop seeing them as the prize. You realize that the real prize was always you. And that is the most powerful place you can be. When an avoidant comes back, most people make the mistake of thinking it means they've changed. They assume that time apart has given the avoidants a new perspective, that they've suddenly realized what they lost and that things will now be different. But this is rarely the case. Avoidants don't return because they've had some grand realization about love. They come back because something in the dynamic has shifted, something that makes them feel safe enough to re-engage. The key is understanding why they are back, and more importantly, making sure that you don't fall into the same cycle that pushed them away in the first place. When an avoidant returns, it's not a sign that they've suddenly become emotionally available. In most cases, they come back out of curiosity, familiarity, or because they sense a change in your energy. If you've truly done the work to move forward and focus on yourself, they can feel that. They notice that you're no longer chasing, no longer waiting, no longer wrapped up in the emotions that once made them withdraw. And the shift in energy draws them in. But here's where most people go wrong. They take the avoidance return as a signal to go back to the way things were. They become overly excited. They immediately invest emotionally, and they unknowingly recreate the exact same environment that made the avoidant leave in the first place. Avoidants don't return because they are suddenly ready to give you the love you always wanted. They return because something in them feels drawn to the new version of you, the version that isn't seeking their approval, the version that isn't emotionally dependent on them. But the moment you slip back into old patterns, the moment you start over-explaining, seeking reassurance, or trying to define the relationship too soon, the avoidant will begin to feel the same pressure they ran from before, and when that happens, the cycle repeats itself. The only way to break this cycle is to meet their return with strength, clarity, and emotional independence. That means not jumping back into the dynamic as if nothing happened. It means not giving them immediate access to your emotions, time, and energy just because they reached out. It means taking a step back and asking yourself, is this actually what I want? Has anything truly changed? Because if they are coming back for the same reasons they left, to soothe their own fears, to satisfy their curiosity, or to regain control, then you are setting yourself up for the same disappointment instead of immediately letting them back in. This is the moment to observe, watch their actions, not their words. Are they making a real effort to connect, or are they just testing the waters? Are they showing up consistently, or are they just looking for a temporary fix to their loneliness? Are they capable of giving you the kind of emotional security you need, or are you falling back into the trap of hoping they'll change? The most powerful response when an avoidant returns is not to rush back into old habits, but to maintain the self-worth and independence you built in their absence. Continue focusing on yourself. Keep the energy that made them return in the first place. Let them prove through consistent effort and action that they are actually capable of showing up differently. And most importantly, remember that their return is not the prize. You are. By the time an avoidant comes back, you should be in a place where their presence is a choice, not a necessity. You should no longer feel the need to win them over or prove your worth. Instead, you should be able to look at them objectively and decide if they are truly capable of being the partner you deserve. And if they're not, then you'll walk away with the confidence of knowing that you never needed them to begin with, unless you shift the very energy that made them leave in the first place. Most people think if they just wait long enough, say the right words, or prove their love, the avoidant will return. But avoidants don't respond to words, they respond to energy. When they sense emotional reliance, pressure, or an expectation of closeness, their instinct is to withdraw. Chasing them, whether through messages, social media, or even mentally holding on to them, only reinforces their need to escape. The key is to stop chasing entirely, not as a strategy to get them back, but as a means of reclaiming your own power. True transformation happens when you shift your focus inward. The moment you stop needing them, when you detach from the outcome, you become someone they no longer feel the need to run from. This shift isn't about pretending to move on. It's about genuinely stepping into your own confidence and independence. When you do this, something changes. Avoidants, who once felt suffocated by emotional intensity, start to feel curiosity instead of pressure. They wonder why you're not chasing, why you seem different. And in that space, they begin to question their decision. But here's the real truth. By the time they come back, you may not even want them anymore, because the journey isn't about them. It's about you. It's about realizing that you were always the prize, that your worth was never determined by someone else's ability to see it. If they return, it should be on your terms, with clear boundaries and a firm understanding that you will no longer repeat old cycles. And if they don't, then you've already won, because your happiness, your confidence, and your sense of self were never dependent on their presence. Thank you for being here, for investing in your own growth, and for stepping into the power that has always been yours.